we are irresistibly attracted to that which moves away? Why, when someone rejects us, instead of forgetting them, we desire them even more? Carl Jung taught us that in the depths of our psyche, there are unconscious forces that govern our desires. We do not only seek the person we are attracted to, we seek what they represent in our internal world. And rejection, far from being a simple denial, is a reflection of our shadows, of our lacks of that which we have not yet integrated. But here is the key: when we understand this dynamic, when we stop clinging and we become the enigma instead of the search, the energy changes, reverse. Psychology is not a trick, but a deep understanding of human desire, and when we apply this principle, we realize that we do not need to run after anything. And today we are going to explore how you can transform rejection into desire and turn every experience into a portal to your own evolution. It is not about feigning indifference, but about cultivating an inner power so solid that your presence or even your absence is felt. Are you ready to discover it? The paradox of rejection: that which escapes becomes desirable. Rejection is not simply an imposed barrier for another, it is a reflection of our own internal dynamics when someone rejects us. Not only do we feel the wound of distance, but an unconscious part in the other is also activated. The shadow of repressed desire. The human being by nature values what is scarce, pursues what flees, and yearns for the unattainable. But why does this happen? The human mind is not designed to desire what it already fully possesses. The longing is born from distance, the feeling of loss, of the uncertainty about whether what was once within reach can be recovered. Rejection, in this sense, is a trigger for desire because it awakens in the other the awareness of what they could be losing. What previously seemed certain now becomes uncertain, and it is in that uncertainty where desire flourishes. From a psychological perspective, the value of something is directly related to its availability. What is abundant is neglected. What is scarce is treasured. This is the same reason why precious stones have more value than common ones, not because they are intrinsically superior, but because they are rare. The human mind, governed by the dynamics of the deep psyche, applies this same principle to interpersonal relationships. If someone feels that they have secured our presence, that no matter what they do, we will be there, their psyche does not generate the feeling of urgency to preserve us. On the other hand, when we withdraw, when we stop being a constant presence, something changes in the unconscious of the other. A feeling of emptiness arises, an absence that was not previously perceived because we were too available, and that absence paradoxically becomes a magnet for desire. This is where psychology comes into play, and in verse not as a mere manipulation strategy, but as a deep understanding of the human mind. It is not about pretending disinterest to get attention, but about recognizing that the dynamics of desire work in the opposite way to logic. The more we insist on being accepted, the more we push the other away. The more we move away, the more we awaken their desire. This phenomenon has deep roots in the collective psyche. In childhood, the forbidden becomes attractive. The child who is denied a toy desires it more intensely than the one who has access to all without restrictions in adolescence. Unrequited love is usually the one that most obsesses, precisely because the mind does not tolerate the emptiness of the unattainable, and in adulthood, this pattern continues to manifest. What moves away seems to take on a special shine. No. However, this paradox not only applies to interpersonal relationships, but also to the relationship we have with ourselves. Often, when we feel rejection, we react with desperation, trying to regain the approval of the other. But in this attempt, we weaken our own value. Instead of reaffirming ourselves, we become persecutors, and in doing so, we unconsciously diminish our own worth in the eyes of those who reject us. The secret of transformation is not in fighting against rejection, but in understanding it as a natural mechanism of the psyche. When we stop desperately seeking external validation and focus on our own growth, The energy changes. We no longer project need but independence. And it is precisely in this state of self-sufficiency that we become attractive. Reverse psychology, in its deepest form, teaches us that power is not in obtaining the validation of others, but in awakening in them the awareness of our absence. And that awareness, when activated, can transform rejection into desire. But the most paradoxical thing of all is that when we truly achieve this level of detachment, many times, we realize that we no longer need what we once longed for. The dance of attraction and distancing in every human relationship, there is a subtle balance between closeness and distance, is not just a game of interactions, but a deep manifestation of those of the psyche. When we pursue with too much intensity, the other feels the pressure and moves away, not because there is no interest, but because the human mind resists what is imposed on it. But when we redirect attention towards our own evolution, when we become complete individuals and not beings in search of validation, something curious happens. We stop being an available presence and we become an enigma. The enigma awakens desire. The psyche is attracted to what it cannot fully possess, because the unattainable resonates with the deepest longings of the unconscious. In the shadow of each individual dwell the unacknowledged desires, the unlived aspects of oneself, and when someone embodies that which we feel distant, the urgency to possess it, to understand it, to integrate it into our own experience is awakened. This is the reason why love is not born from complacency, but from challenge, not from absolute surrender, but from the play of distances. When a person is always available, without mysteries, without spaces of their own, the mind stops perceiving them as something special, not because their value diminishes, but because familiarity reduces the perception of desire. It is the same principle that operates in art, in beauty, and in life itself. What is fully revealed loses its magic, while what is hinted at maintains its power. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of individuation, the process by which a person becomes a whole being without depending on the approval or presence of another. In this process, the individual learns to be self-sufficient, not to search outside for completeness that can only be found within his or her own depth. Paradoxically, when someone achieves this state of self-sufficiency, they become magnetic. They no longer project need. They no longer pursue. And in that independence, in that aura of autonomy, the most powerful attraction arises. It is not about pretending disinterest or playing at indifference. It is about understanding that true attraction is not born from insistence, but from the naturalness with which we inhabit our own being. A person who respects themselves, who cultivates their inner world, who has their own dreams and passions, generates an energetic field that is irresistible, because the other receives, consciously or unconsciously, that there is something in that person that cannot be fully possessed. The dance of attraction and distancing is essentially a balancing act between closeness and autonomy. It is understanding that we do not need to disappear or become cold to generate interest, but simply to focus on our own growth. When our attention stops being obsessed with the response of the other and is directed towards our own expansion, a transformation occurs. We stop being demanding and we become full beings. And in that fullness, desire naturally blossoms. Ultimately, the greatest mystery we can offer is not a trick or a strategy, but the reflection of a psyche that continues to evolve. Attraction is not a matter of manipulation, but of authenticity, being someone with a world of one's own, with thoughts and emotions that do not revolve around another, is what truly ignites the spark of desire. Because in the unknown, in what remains to be discovered, lies the deepest fascination, the power of conscious indifference. Feigned indifference is a fragile mask built on insecurity and fear of loss. It is an attempt at manipulation that eventually cracks, revealing the desperation hidden behind it. But conscious indifference, that which is born of a deep connection with our own being, is not an empty strategy, it is a state of authentic power. It is not about playing at being unattainable, but about understanding that our value is not dependent on external validation. We live in a world where desire is conditioned by the perception of scarcity. What seems difficult to achieve, what is not easily delivered, acquires a special value in the human mind. When someone rejects us, our instinct pushes us to cling to, prove our worth, to try to reverse the other's decision, but this only reinforces the rejection because it transmits an energy of lack. The paradox is that when we stop seeking approval, when we let go of the need to be chosen, something in our energy changes. We are no longer the person desperate to be validated, but a being complete in itself, and completeness is magnetic. When someone rejects us, and instead of clinging, we immerse ourselves in our own evolution. We emit a different vibration. We stop being a presence that implores, and we become a mystery that intrigues the human mind, cannot help but be attracted to that which does not give explanations, for which it moves away, without resentment, for that which does not seek to convince. Jung spoke of individuation is the process in which a person stops identifying with the expectations of others and becomes their most authentic version. Conscious indifference is a reflection of this process. It is not a shield against pain, but the full acceptance that our value is not measured by the attention or affection of others. This indifference is not coldness or contempt. It is not about showing that we do not care what happens, but about living from a place where our happiness does not depend on the reaction of others. When we stop expecting something from the outside, we become a source of internal fulfillment, and it is precisely there, at that point of emotional freedom, where desire in the other can be awakened. The human psyche is contradictory. It wants what it cannot control. It desires what seems outside of its domain. When someone feels that they have us secured, their mind stops valuing us in the same way. But when they perceive that we have found something greater than their approval, their perception changes, not because we are manipulating, but because the absence of need is deeply attractive. The true power of conscious indifference lies in the fact that it is not a forced act, but a natural consequence of self-love. When we stop chasing, when we become the center of our own lives, we stop being an option and we become an irreplaceable presence, transforming rejection into personal power. The essential thing is not to use reverse psychology as a trick to get someone back, but as a bridge to our own development. The need to be accepted is one of the deepest forces that shape the human psyche, but it is also the root of many of our emotional wounds. When someone rejects us, they are not stripping us of value, but showing us like a mirror those areas where our emotional autonomy still needs to be strengthened. Rejection is not a condemnation, it is an opportunity for growth. However, at the moment we experience it, can feel like a blow to the soul. We wonder what we did wrong, what we should have changed, and we fall into the trap of seeking external validation. But here lies the paradox. The more we seek to be accepted, the further we move away from our essence, and the more we try to prove our worth through the eyes of others, the more we disconnect from our own power. The key is not to resist or seek to validate our ego through the acceptance of others. The instant we stop chasing external validation, the power changes hands. It is no longer the other who determines our worth, but ourselves. And this is true transformation, turning the wound of rejection into the fuel for our expansion. When someone turns their back on us, they unknowingly grant us the opportunity to rediscover. Instead of clinging to the desire to be accepted, we can use rejection as a spark that ignites our transformation. It is time to redirect the energy, stop looking outside for approval, and start building from within. Paradoxically, when we stop needing, we begin to attract. Carl Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which an individual becomes their most authentic version, free from the projections of others. On this journey, every obstacle, every loss, and every rejection become guideposts. We are not here to fit into the lives of others, but to fully embody who we are. And when we do this, something amazing happens. The energy shifts. We are no longer beggars, love. We no longer seek to be chosen. Instead, we become a center of natural magnetism. Desire arises from the perception of worth, and the greatest value a human being can possess is their sense of completeness. A person who chooses herself, who finds purpose and passion, beyond external validation, radiates an attractiveness that is hard to ignore. When we understand this, rejection stops being a blow and becomes an invitation to growth. Instead of asking ourselves, "Why don't they choose me?" we begin to question, "I chose myself." This is the essence of reverse psychology in its deepest and most authentic form. It is not about feigning indifference or playing with the emotions of others, but about experiencing a true internal transformation. When we stop looking outside for what we can only find within, we free ourselves, and in that freedom, in that genuine detachment, we become magnetic. Rejection is not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new version of ourselves. It pushes us to look beyond our insecurities, to strengthen our self-esteem, and to live from fullness instead of lack. It is not easy, but it is the path to true emotional independence. In the end, the greatest act of reverse psychology is not a strategy that we apply to others, but to ourselves. It is the art of turning apparent loss into a rebirth, of transforming the absence of the other into a stronger presence of our own being. And when we achieve this, when we become complete individuals, the world begins to gravitate around us. Desire is not born from persecution, but from the void left by what seemed safe. When we stop striving to be chosen, we become irresistible. But the true power is not in the other looking for us, but in that, by the time they do, maybe we no longer care. Rejection is a door disguised as a wall. It is not an end, but a redirection. And in that transformation, we can not only attract that which once turned its back on us, but we can discover something even more valuable to ourselves. I invite you to continue transforming your being with the profound philosophy of Carl Jung,